Welcome to Ladbroke Church. This is what the building looked like last summer. We had external scaffold on the tower and also all around the other end of the building, the chancel. And there was internal scaffold filling the chancel too. The middle section of the building, the nave, was still usable on Sundays, COVID permitting. And recently the tower scaffold has gone, but the chancel is still encased in scaffolding. So today I'm going to show you via photographs and some video clips 4 aspects of the work that was done by the stonemasons who've been working behind the scaffolding. These 4 sections look at repairs to the tower, taking out a window mullion, repairing the top of the parapet, and making and fixing a very intricate stone on the tower. And after all that, there'll be some time for your questions. So, the first thing, from the quarry to the tower. The tower of Ladbroke Church was built about 600 years ago from 2 types of local limestone. One of those stones is an orange colour, Hornton stone, and that's iron rich. It was quarried from just south of Ladbroke, about 8 miles south. The pale stone, which is white lias, was probably quarried even closer. So this tower, the outside, has had 600 years of erosion. Its condition wasn't that bad if you consider what would have happened to an exposed cliff for the same time. In the picture you can see a man on a rope. He came down from the top of the tower and was conducting a stone survey. This was done about 2 years ago to help us decide which stones had to be replaced. He was checking which ones were rotten and discovered it was mainly the Hornton stone. Ideally, we wanted to replace that stone with more Hornton stone, but the quarry there is no longer open. However, iron-rich limestone is quarried a few miles away at Great Tew. You can see on the map Banbury with Hornton just to the northwest and Great Tew to the south, and Ladbroke's just at the top of that map. Similarly, we can't get thick white lias these days. So because we wanted stone of those dimensions, we used another limestone, Bath stone, to replace the white limestone blocks in the tower. But now we're going to follow some Great Tew stone from the quarry to its final resting place. On the left, you can see my husband Simon standing by a very large block. These are the size of the blocks that are transported by lorry from the quarry to the stonemason's workshop, which is near Flor, just over the border in Northamptonshire. And there, saws of various sizes cut it first into slices and then into individual blocks of the right size. On the right, you can see the very first few replacement stones that were delivered to Ladbroke Church. So to replace the stone on the tower, the old stone has to be cut out. On the left, you can see the beginning of this. Luckily, if the stone is rotten, it's a relatively easy start using a tool called a breaker. It gets a bit harder and dustier as they go further in. Now, our tower walls are about 1 metre thick, 3 foot in old money. That would have originally been built as 2 sides with a rubble fill. But the repairs we did have just been to the outside and in fact just the front 6 inches or so. On the right, you can see a couple of holes that have been cut, so the old stone has been cut out and it's ready to receive the new. So these blocks that have been cut have to be lifted up to the right level of the scaffold. They can be lifted by hand using a rope pulley if they're small, but the heavier blocks, the bigger ones, are winched up with an electric winch. And then they're mortared in. The stones on the tower are called ashlar, that is, they're dress stone blocks, and they have very little gap between them, so don't use much mortar. On the aisle and on the chancel, you can see where they've used larger blocks. So when you can come to site, or when you're taking your exercise, you can have a look and see the different types of stone in different areas of the building. On the buttresses, the thick bits that stick out on the tower that provide extra support, if there were large areas behind stones that had been removed, it was possible to add stones in the gap and not just mortar. And another thing to note is the new stone was positioned to the original line. That means if the adjacent stone was eroded but still sound, extra mortar would be put in to the area adjacent, the joining part. But not too much, otherwise with time it would just fall out. We had to be careful that the right sort of mortar was used. We had to use a lime mortar which doesn't set hard rather than a cement mortar. Lime mortar has two things that we needed. One is that it gives and it reforms rather than cracking, and the other is to make sure that the formula, the recipe that was used, was softer than the stone, so that the mortar in future will erode first. It's much cheaper to repoint than to replace stone. I've seen in the Ladbroke records that in the early 20th century, the church wardens took advantage of some free local cement mortar from the predecessors of Rugby Cement. Next time you're at church, if you have a look at the base of the walls to the aisles, you can see where the stones have eroded and the mortar sticks out. No doubt that's a job for somebody else in a few more decades' time to replace those stones that are eroding. So let's move on from the tower and now look at how some of the old stone was removed. And the stones we're going to look at are the window mullions. These are the vertical stones between the glass panels within a window. These were made of sandstone and, assuming they're the originals, would be about 500 years old. Some of them had been partly replaced, but most of them were in a very bad condition, not helped by the ends of the ferramenta. That's on the picture on the left. You can see the bars go into the stonework, and these are bars to which the glass is attached. These are made of iron, and as they've rusted, that's expanded inside the stonework and caused it to crack. The picture on the right shows part of the mullion outside, and I think that's just weathering erosion. Stone absorbs water, and if that then freezes and then thaws, that weakens the stone, and then it can crumble away. How do you repair a mullion? Well, the first thing is you've got to take the glazing out. The glazing is held in with mortar, and that was removed using a hammer and chisel. It looked a bit brutal, but they managed to get the panels out okay. So they take the panels away and chip out the ironwork. The gaps are propped up to bear the weight of the stonework above, and then we've got a video that shows you them actually taking the mullions out. What you're going to see is just a minute or so of the most interesting part of several hours' work on each mullion. These are just the highlights.
There we go. I'll do that one.
This slide's called The Difference 500 Years Makes. And look at those pictures. On the left, you see the old mullions, and on the right, some new ones. Each mullion is made from 2 stones to get 1.5 metres or 5 feet. It's best to have stones the same way up in the building as it was in the ground, so when the stone was formed. In the trade, that's called bed laid. So if the quarried stone is only about 1 metre high, 2 stones have to be joined together. That's much better than using a long stone on its side. If you look at the new mullions on the right, you can see there's a hole. That's for a stainless steel rod. So if that goes up through 2 adjacent stones, it makes it much stronger, a much stronger joint against sideways movement. On the left, you can see that parts of the old mullion has broken away, and this next video clip shows just how fragile the stone had become. Okay, so this breaks very easily, you tell me.
Yep. There you go.
Just like biscuit. These pictures show the new mullions in position. And this particular window had new sills too. If you take a close look at the joining area, you can see that on the sill, as in the picture on the left, it's made oversized. That helps the mullion to be positioned exactly where you want it, and then the excess is chiselled off to give 100% match on all sides. And if you look on the right, you can see what a fine job they made of that task. And the final step in the process is to return the glazing. Our glazing went off to Chapel Studios workshop and after repair came back for refitting. We had the first 2 plain windows come back before Christmas, but at the moment we're still waiting for the others, including the stained glass. Each panel is fitted into the slot that the observer might have noticed a couple of slides beforehand, and then it gets mortared in. And extra mortar is needed to fill in any gaps at the top between the glazing and the original stonework. And there on the right, you can see one of our first finished repaired windows. Another part of the building, we're back on the tower. We are at the top of the parapet where we have battlements. So in that photo, what you see in the background is the bottom of the spire. It's very high up. As you can see, some parts of those battlements are more eroded than others. It's very exposed to the wind up here. The crisp edge stones are previous replacements, and now it's the turn for the others to be replaced. What do we have to do? You're probably getting the hang of this now. To prepare a new stone, we've got to know what shape to make it, and in this case, we need a template. For that, a small section of the previous repairs was removed. And I love this picture of the stone on the left because it tells us so much about the construction of this part of the building. You can see there's a stainless steel rod protruding out of this stone. That helps strengthen the join. You can see below that some very dark resin, which is like glue that holds the rod inside the hole. And you can see how pale the unexposed stone is, though the part below the stainless steel and the resin is very, very pale. So that has no lichens compared to the exposed part of the stone. And if you look above that steel rod, you can see just how much erosion has happened. There's very little area, probably only about half of the cross-sectional area on the stone that was removed. So this was used as a template for the cross-section, and the stonemasons measured the lengths they needed for the new stones, and they were cut at the workshop and brought to site. We now have a short video to see what happened next. Again, these are the cherries on the cake, just the highlights. It takes much checking and tweaking to get it just right. And here is the finished work, with the local jackdaws coming to investigate it. As you can see, there's a brilliant dimensional match, and by the time the scaffolding came down, that new stone was already looking less bright. As the lichens grow, it will become harder and harder to see the difference between the repairs and the stone that it's next to. Bryn, the senior mason, I think really enjoyed this part of the work, and he told Simon, who was there videoing it, he would guarantee it for another 100 years. But we very much hope it's going to last much longer than that. And our last section is about a very intricate stone, one of the ones holding up a lead water spout near the top of the tower. And here we've got a before and after. It's not the same water spout, but it does show you the difference. As you can see, it was going to be much harder to template because there really wasn't much of this stone there at all. The masons could get a side profile from the adjacent stones, but the centre section was based on what the gutter spout needed and what was going to look right. Maybe originally there was a gargoyle there, but now it's just plain because it would have been pure speculation to have created anything else. This final video clip starts with the spout stone being shaped in the workshop and then moves on to it being fitted on site.
Your little boys silver. How did you say that? Are you right?
Oh, we've got plenty. That bit of blue rope has given us resistance. Right, one wants to pick up. What's yours saying? One wants. You want to go? Pick up it.
To summarise what you've seen, a little bit about getting the stone from the quarry to the church, removing old and fixing new stone, and a little of what that involves. But please don't forget that for every new stone and every trowel of mortar used, almost the same weight of rubble has been taken away from site. Tons and tons and tons of it, all swept up and bagged by hand. No mean feat in itself. So now I've just got a couple of slides to thank people, and then we'll move on to questions. Our biggest thanks for the work that's been shown today is to Bowden & Ward stonemasons and also their subcontractors. And I'd like to thank Chapel Studio and Acanthus Clues Architects and our quantity surveyor PDQS. And you can see there who's helped Simon and I put together this video production and all the photographs. I'd also like to thank everyone, and I know a number of people hearing this have been these people, our fundraisers and people who've donated money to this repair project and have made it all possible. And not forgetting also lottery players who've supported us through the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And now we throw the floor open to any questions. Chris, you must have a question.
Oh, I've got a few. Yeah, no. Wearing my blacksmith's hat, you slightly skipped over the putting back of the window. In when it was they've got the new stones cut in, you've got slots cut in. What happened to the metal fixing bars? What do you call them?
The ferramenta.
Ferramenta. That's not in my dictionary of archaeology, of architecture. I was looking it up in my dictionary and I couldn't find it. Okay, I've learnt a word. What happened to them? Did you get a blacksmith to sort of make new ones up, or they
did go off to a blacksmith. My understanding is they cut the ends off. They put stainless steel ends on them.
Ah, yeah.
And presumably forged them together. I mean, you could barely see the join, and then they came back black. I'm not sure if that's paint black, or I think actually they are painted over the top. Yes. So they re-tipped them in stainless steel.
Clever. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you.
There seems to be a reasonable amount of waste in getting the stone from out of the quarry to actually shaping the smaller bricks.
Yeah.
Do they have any use for that waste other than just crumbling it and using it as fill somewhere?
I mean, that's really what happens to it. If there's a big offcut, it might be able to be used for a smaller piece of stone. But most of it gets crushed up and becomes sort of driveways and I suppose hardcore.
Yeah, okay.
What's the latest schedule for completion of the work? Is that a bad question?
When's the end of COVID? The stonemasons think they're going to be finished in the summer, hopefully end of May. They're probably only a month or two away from what they thought they were going to do, but the buttresses at the far end of the chancel, so you've got the really big window, there's some orange buttresses which are completely Hornton stone at the end, and the specifications said take a bit off and have a good look at it and repair as necessary. Well, they've taken a bit off and both buttresses need completely redoing. So that's more money. Luckily we've had contingency money, but it's about 2 or 3 months work in the workshop and 2 months on site to finish those, which is why that's going to take that long. The timing, we hope that by April, but it's very COVID dependent because people are shielding and it's in a small workshop, so they can only have one person rather than 6 in there and the rest of it. We're hoping to get the high level windows back in April, but the big east window hasn't even gone yet. And again, a bit like the buttresses, when it was looked at 2 years ago from ground level, it was thought, take it out. We've got to renew the cement between the lead and the glass and a few little repairs. But now we've got the scaffolding up inside and we've been able to get very, very close to all the glass. You can see it needs a lot more work than that. So we don't know when it can start or how long it will take. And if COVID's still happening, that will extend the time as well. So unfortunately, I don't know when at the moment when the window's going or how long it will be away, but I imagine it will be away 4 to 6 months.
Will it go as one, Jackie, in one piece, or well, several, not one piece, but as one big window?
I think they will take it all out at once, but each vertical is made of about 4 panels. I was surprised because I thought, I could imagine this, I was very worried about insurance, this big lorry taking it down the motorway and being in an accident. And I'm thinking, oh, they need a big lorry because it's these great long bits of glass. But behind the ferramenta, they've joined panels, but you don't really notice the joins. So they will take it out in sections, but you've certainly got to do a vertical section all at once. And I think they will take the whole lot away.
How are the bats doing?
I'm glad you've mentioned bats. Let me go to a slide. So our bats, if people don't know our bats, we've got 2 sorts of bats at church inside and 2 additional species outside. So on the left, it's my favorite picture. This was picked up on a security camera of a long-eared bat. Because we knew we had bats, we had to have a bat survey. And that said, you've got holes in your tower, and at least one of those, when they did the survey, they saw a bat in the morning, went in to sleep in there. So we had to put up bat boxes in the trees. So we've 3 bat boxes on site. We also had to make sure most of the bats, again, at the dawn survey, they could see where they went in. And we had to make sure we left that hole available to them. Luckily, it wasn't in the tower. It was actually above a nave window, sort of at the roof line. These bats are tiny. Certainly the pipistrelles. Here on the right, because we had bat boxes and an orphaned bat was found in somebody's house in Hedges Close in the village, the Warwick Bat Group were looking after that. And another bat, pipistrelle, they got on the same day via a vet of unknown source. These 2 bats wanted, they were looking for somewhere where they could join a colony, where the older bats would tell them what to do. And because we had bat boxes, the person in the village actually contacted me and said, oh yes, quite happy for you to put them in our bat boxes. The holes were filled with like old tea towel until dusk, and then they were open so the bats would fly out and they'd hear the others squeaking around and join up, we hope. So this time of year our bats tend to hibernate, and they might have woken up tonight because it was very warm yesterday and today, but when it's cold they hibernate. They're up in the roof of our church inside. Maybe 1 or 2 in the boxes, we don't know. We're not authorized to go and open the box. You have to be licensed to do that because they're a protected species. But we hope that our bats haven't minded the work. Whether they like the dust or not, I don't know. And no doubt they'll be there next year leaving their messages all over the church for us to clear up.
Yeah.
I've got a slide about the clock, if people are interested in the clock, because some of the stonework behind the clock had to be renewed. So that meant the clock had to come off. And the picture on the left is when it was being lowered down on the electric winch. Here's yours truly with the man from the clock company when it got down to ground level. And they, what do you call it? No, they sandblasted all the old stuff off. I mean, it was a bit, it wasn't essential that it was renewed, the gilding and the paintwork, but it seemed a bit silly if it was coming off and wasn't going to come off for another 50 years or more, not to do this. So they sandblasted it, and then they painted it black and re-gilded it, and they fixed it with the tougher staples. Before, it was just held on with sort of tiny little things that went behind. Oh, there's one there, little things that went into the stonework. Now they always fix them with much bigger staples. But they only took the face away and the bit that connected the face to the big mechanism in the ringing chamber. They didn't have to take all the mechanism away.